Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the Purge election year. The Purge films have always been very influenced by John Carpenter, and specifically each film is kind of taking a different element of John Carpenter's career. The first Purge was really trying to do the Assault on Precinct 13 thing with a house. James DeMonaco also, wrote the remake of Assault on Precinct 13. And then the next one is kind of more of an Escape from New York thing. And as much as Carpenter, who obviously was critiquing more of the Reagan era, because that was the time he was involved in, particularly with films like They Live and Big Trouble in Little China, takes on more of the archetypes of the Reagan era than politically. This film, The Purge election year, tries to take on kind of more modern politics in that guise, but kind of only in the way that this is an election year, that this film is getting released, and this film is called The Purge election year. That's kind of it. There's not really deeper elements. This isn't really talking about Trump's America. This isn't really talking about all sorts of political issues that could be interesting to go in. And although The Purge has been used in actual political situations, particularly in the Baltimore uprising right before the riots happened, people kept mentioning and referring to the Purge, and I've heard of that mentioned in other actual riots that have actually happened. The Purge is not actually political, really. It's kind of political in that way, talking about uprising and how you could kill anyone and get away with it in one night, like the whole concept of the Purge is. But maybe the Purge election year kind of pushes the political elements of the Purge franchise to its limit, really. The whole concept of this particular one, which is supposed to kind of talk about the two presidential candidates, really doesn't. But in terms of its fun, pulpy genre-ness that the Purge movies are so good at, I think the Purge election year is still a fairly good entry into the franchise. Maybe not as good as the Purge Anarchy, and it somehow actually feels cheaper than the Purge Anarchy, which was interesting. But it still fulfills that kind of seeing ridiculous set pieces and seeing what people would do on the Purge, rather than just commit all sorts of crimes, mainly just committing murder, which is kind of the unspoken rule of the Purge movies, is you don't really get into any other crime you could commit, like tax fraud or downloading movies or ripping that seal off of the mattresses or something like that. They instead have people just gunning motherfuckers down. And as tough as kind of America has been, and politically everything has been, and you could make this to be about the Brexit or whatever the political climate is in your country, which I'm sure is awful like it is everywhere, this film is really more about having a crazy adventure in a crazy set piece, much like John Carpenter did with Escape from New York, in the prison of New York in that film, but in a much more B and sillier environment with a lot of gore and a lot of tension to push you out of it, and hopefully you can get through this Purge movie just as much as the characters hope they can as well. A presidential candidate named Charlie Ronan, who, after her family were killed many Purges ago, I'm not exactly sure when this film takes place, in the future, in the not too distant future, who knows, but it takes place in the future. And in one of the previous Purges, I'm assuming about 20 years ago, because she's eligible to be president and you have to be a certain age, I forget what that age is, but I'm assuming it's been a little bit, and her family was killed in a Purge, and she promises to end the Purge if she wins the presidency. But of course, the new founding fathers of America, the political party, which I guess is sort of supposed to be the Republicans, but they don't say it because people would get all upset, and I'm sure lots of Republicans enjoy the Purge just as much as all the other people. But they are trying to get their candidate to win, who's a Minister Edwin Owens, who's played by Kelly Secker, who's I'm actually a fan of from Homicide: Life on the Street. And as the Purge is approaching, it's becoming more and more politically charged, but then it turns out that the one rule of the Purge, that you cannot kill government officials, has been overturned, so they can go after her and kill her. But thankfully, Frank Grillo, who's the head of Ronin Security, has come back with his character of Leo Barnes, returning from the last movie, The Purge Anarchy, and is going to protect her as people try to attack her house and kill her because of that overturn, who are of course sent by the NFFA. And so he has to go out with her on Purge night, as he gets the help of a deli owner, a notorious purger, and a shop boy from the deli, as they try to make their way through the Purge and have Charlie Ronan live so that they can overturn the Purge and not have to go through this again. This Purge is a little different, and I'm not sure I exactly like it, but I kind of like that Frank Grillo is back. And that is that it's more of an actual sequel. The last Purge movie, The Purge Anarchy, was only a sequel because of its concept, but it didn't bring back back any characters. This is the most sequel-y of all the Purge films because Frank Grillo's character is back. Also Edwin Hodge, who apparently was in the first Purge, and I've heard maybe was in the second one, but I can't get IMDb or anything to verify that, but I know he was in the first one. I'm not sure if that was the same character as it is here. I couldn't figure that out. I only see each of these movies once. But the whole idea of this being a sequel is, I guess, a little interesting, but it kind of goes against what makes this franchise so fantastic, is that they can just be like, hey, it's the Purge, and we're in this night, and there's all these characters, and they have to survive. And that's really it. You don't really need to have characters coming back for each Purge movie. You just need to really have the concept. Now, Frank Grillo's character of Leo Barnes was really one of the standouts and really the best character from the Purge Anarchy, and probably the only character from the Purge that anyone remembers or even gives a shit about. So him coming back, I actually agree with, because out of anyone, he's the only one I would ever care about coming back. And Frank Grillo's really awesome in this and kind of plays into the whole B element of these films. And I really think that helps what James DeMonaco is trying to do. I semi-disliked it while I was watching it, how sequel-y it was, just because I like the idea of this real anthology horror franchise that can really just be like, hey, it's the Purge and everyone accepts it. So it would have been cool if like each Purge is completely different. I know they were talking about this film being about the very first Purge, but they got Frank Grillo back. That was their backup plan if they couldn't get Frank Grillo. I didn't know Frank Grillo was in such demand right now, but I guess he is. So their plan was if he didn't come back, they would have done one about the first Purge, which I think would be interesting. You could kind of jump around in the timeline if you wanted to. I like how kind of silly these movies are, but I like how many different set pieces they can have. The one legendary Purge woman who, Lainey Rucker, played by Betty Gabriel, she drives by and someone just has a guillotine in an alley. Like, what the fuck? Like, sometimes I feel like they have people just sit in a room and come up with set pieces, but it's always like so fun and silly and like kind of cult movie-ish. Like, there's this one girl who like gets upset at the deli owner because she tried to steal a candy bar and of course he wouldn't let her. I imagine if you're in the Purge and someone like pisses you off the night before, you're like, oh fuck, we better lock up because someone's gonna purge me or something. She comes back to kill him because she wants her candy bar, which is like so ridiculous. But she drives up, she's like the cliche cartoon version of a millennial, and the whole car is covered in like these like Christmas lights. It's like so ridiculous. I love that stuff about the Purge. I love how silly this whole thing is, but it has so much fun with its concept. I kind of have mixed feelings about it trying to be political, because I think what the Purge is trying to say is that a lot of the people who are taking advantage of during the Purge are like the poor people in worse economic situations. That's who the Purge really goes against. That is actually a little interesting and political and gets into our socio-economical political climate. I think it does at least say that, but it doesn't really get too much into it. This movie's really more about interesting set pieces and having fun like that. I like the idea of the foreign tourists who come to America to Purge. That was an interesting touch. They don't really do enough with that. It's kind of just a little segment and then they come back and that's kind of it. There's a lot of things in this movie that they just kind of have for like, this is a cool idea that could happen in the Purge, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the narrative. Most of it's trying to stay alive throughout the night. And the whole idea of Frank Grillo saving you feels like the Purge Anarchy again, which is like, I guess, guys. It's interesting that this franchise has come out at this point in time because we have so many more riots right now, because we have so many more uprisings. This feels a little more political, volatile in the idea that the people could rise up and kind of get theirs in one night. But I like how it goes for the John Carpenter thing, but I think the idea of it just kind of being broadly political ruins any political satire it has going throughout it. Certainly the minister character, I guess probably closer to someone like Romney, so if this had come out before the first Purge movie came out, I guess this would be a little more political. I'm not really sure who Charlie Ronan is supposed to be. It's just very broadly in its politics. I still kind of enjoy this franchise. I enjoy what it's trying to do with its premise. I know everyone argues like, yes, this has been done on Star Trek and it's been done on so many things and been complained about from everything like Rick and Morty. But the point of this isn't to be original. I think James DeMonaco isn't really an original filmmaker. He's someone who's very influenced by things and influenced by like cult movies and B movies and exploitation and things like that. And this is all of that put together. He is kind of our average B movie maker, but who gets to do it on a big studio level. Sure, he's not the most inspired director. I do give him kudos for actually making every Purge movie. I believe he's written and directed every Purge film. Not a lot of people stick around with franchises that long, and he's really given them a certain aesthetic. I like, because he made this so sequely, I'm not sure about him coming back. Apparently he has a whole mapped out history of the Purge, which he almost put online during the first Purge movie, but didn't, thank God. He isn't the greatest B filmmaker going on right now. There's other better ones, but with the Purge films, it's always kind of fun when they come out and go, oh shit, it's a new Purge, and I get to see like people in crazy costumes costumes and masks. Somebody scares someone in this film and goes like, oh, it's Halloween for adults as opposed to Halloween. I guess it's Halloween for adults, but like instead of candy they kill people. That's messed up, but whatever. Frank Grillo is kind of one of those B actors who you like, but then if someone goes, well, they're kind of bland, but you're like, yeah, I like him, but I can't really think of a reason I like him other than him being the action star. But he's frankly good at doing that in a B movie. I also like Betty Gabriel, who was pretty good, and a lot of people have suggested maybe she should come back. If they bring another character back for the fourth Purge movie, it should be her character of Laney Rucker, or maybe, you know, they could explain how Laney Rucker became Laney Rucker or something like that, because she was actually a cool character. Everyone else is pretty bland, although I did like seeing Kyle Sucker, I think, but he didn't do a particularly great job. You don't see these films for the acting, and these films don't pretend like you're seeing them for the acting, so why pretend like you are, you know? I mean, the only personality you're really seeing it for, if you're seeing it for anyone, is probably Frank Grillo, because you saw the Purge Anarchy, and they brought him back for the Purge election year. The Purge films, they are political in the sense that you have this idea that you could rise up and kill the person who's fighting against you, and that's kind of the fun of them. Although it would be funnier, and, you know, everyone says, why don't you just file your taxes, particularly because these films always take place in March, which is when most people are doing their taxes, so it would be within reason that you'd want to do that. Maybe H&R Block would have a special, like, cheat on your taxes on Purge night. But, of course, this film isn't interested in that. It's interested in the fun, ridiculous set pieces, in the masks, in the killing of people, and in the situation. And I think the Purge election year gets what's good about a Purge movie. Is it the best Purge movie? No, that's still the Purge Anarchy, but it's still a lot better than the first one, which really was the weakest. It's kind of interesting how none of them have managed to be as bad as the first one, which was just so isolated to that house. It was super boring. Probably because that was the one who was trying to say much more economically than the other two. What's interesting is that when they play more in the fun of these films, they're a lot more fun. And because this film gets kind of bogged down by politics that it really shouldn't get into, because it really doesn't seem like they entirely understand them. Having that shop boy at the time tell the presidential candidate, like, you know, if you win Florida, you might win this whole thing. But then later she used that advice and you're like, I feel like she knew that. I feel like she maybe knew that, shop boy. I mean, no offense to you. You were good throughout the most of it. I just don't think this film, like anyone involved, understands that. But what they understand is making a fun, very digestible, very gory, silly set piece with high concept, B cultish movie. And they're fairly good at it. It's not the most amazing franchise on earth, but it's kind of fun little concept, keeps me coming back. And if you came back for Purge Anarchy and were surprised how much better that was, you're not going to be disappointed. This doesn't live up to the heights of the Purge Anarchy, and I think maybe they should maybe try a little harder next time, but it's not like the Purge Anarchy was a cinematic classic or anything. This is kind of like Hollywood's only like fun B conceptual kind of horror action film, very influenced by John Carpenter. It will never showcase the kind of fine filmmaking that John Carpenter's known for, or say politically what John Carpenter could say, and in such a universal way that you almost don't need to be reminded that he's talking about Reagan-era politics. This is so broad in what it's saying about it, probably put the election year thing on there because they knew it would sell more tickets, and had the election year premise because of that as well. But it's not saying anything about politics, or Donald Trump, or Hillary Clinton, unless you super read into it and force a lot of things on, and you'll sound like a crazy person yelling at the YMCA, passing out flyers where everyone else is trying to work out at the gym. But if you enjoy the Purge movies, this is a great one. I think the election year lives up to the pulpy, ridiculous, gory concept that this movie's really going for. And if you're into kind of very conceptual B cult movies, the Purge election year is there for you, and there for you to purge on all these movies one day and enjoy them and have a much better time than this actual election year will actually be. So if you have seen the Purge election year and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.